Next question. How does Genesis 3 relate to the calendar when Elohim says, yet his days shall be 120 years? Okay. I don't think it relates to the calendar. I think it relates to heaven and earth. Let me explain. In your verse, it says, and the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. Now, the very, very interesting thing about this is just before that, in Genesis 5:32, the last verse of chapter 5, Elohim stops numbering the age of the patriarchs. We get to Genesis 5:32, and he tells us that Noah was 500 years old. Then he tells us he begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But the number of their years on earth are not told to us. So I find that interesting because it's when we're in Genesis 2, it says these are the generations, Toldah, the word for generation. It has the same root word for Yeled, which is boy. These are the generations of heaven and earth when they were created, in the day the Lord made the heaven and the earth and the heavens. Stay with me because the last verse is pretty important. And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for the Lord had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the soil. But there was a mist that went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. And the Lord formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. At this point, man was the generations of heaven and earth. In other words, he came from the dirt, the dust, and Elohim breathed the spirit of life into the man. Remember that Genesis 6:3 says, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for he is also flesh. And yet his days shall be 120 years. So Elohim's spirit will not always strive with Adam. Adamah is the name for dirt. Adam, Adamah. My spirit will not always strive with man who came out of the Adamah, for he is also flesh. Okay? No longer just a spiritual being created in the image of Elohim. He's flesh. The thing we need to remember about being the generation of the generations of heaven and earth is that Elohim is the possessor of heaven and earth. And in Deuteronomy 4:6 is one of the places we see that heaven and earth is to witness against us. And I believe this is exactly what you're seeing in Genesis 6:3, that his day shall be 120 years, that Elohim was limiting the days that man could be on the earth. Because what is it we read in Genesis chapter 6? That evil or sin had been increasing since the day that Adam fell. And so by limiting their days or their years that they were on earth to 120 years, he was limiting how wicked an individual could also be. And so all of this points to that we are the generations of heaven and earth, and that the earth witnesses against us, and that by limiting their years to be 120, and we saw that Noah was 500 years old, and that's the last age that was listed. The age of his sons were not listed. That Elohim was literally limiting the number of years we lived on this earth, and the wickedness that we could achieve in those years. Imagine if in the 6th chapter of Genesis Those people also lived 1,000 years, also lived 500 years, 500 years as Noah, lived 900 years as Adam. Imagine the wickedness they could have brought on the earth. And eventually, anyway, Elohim did bring a flood and start over.